Before we begin this video, I would like to bring to your attention that I have only one objective in mind, and my objective is to help you get results while also not making myself out to be the big shot, because that's something that I'm trying to avoid. I'm trying to not be a big shot when I'm making the YouTube videos, when I'm trying to learn, when I'm trying to teach. It's something that I'm trying to overcome. And I don't want people to think that I'm a big shot just because I have my own personal experience and I have my own personal take on matters, even if they might not be perfect. That said, this video here is 3 things you must do to change the status of your relationship. The first thing is we're going to change the way we see our romantic interest. This is my specific term for what other people might call specific person or partner or ex. Doesn't really matter. We must change the way we see with our heart and our eyes and our mind our romantic interest. The problem is, how am I supposed to tell people in which spectrum? This is the problem with being a relationship coach, mentor, dating advice, etc. Because it's like, there's so many different parts to the machine. Which one am I a specialist in? I'm kind of like a general practitioner at this point. You could be dating from the ground up. You could be in a relationship falling apart. You could have already been broken up with. But the process remains all the same. We must change the way we see our romantic interest. The second thing is we must change the way we see ourselves. If you're fortunate enough, and I imagine many people are not, but if you're fortunate enough to realize that changing the conception of ourselves is one of the most fundamental things that we can do to enter into a relationship and maintain that, then kudos to you, because that's exactly what we need to do. We need to change the conception of ourselves. The problem with the conception of ourselves is that we might not necessarily realize how we even see ourselves. So to enter into a new relationship or change the status of a relationship, we must change the way we see our romantic interest and the way we see ourselves. But there's one other thing that's just been reminded to me, is that we need to change, maybe not change the way we see the environment, but we need to change the environment in itself. Change environment. Now, why do I say this? Well, I've been consuming and practicing dating and relationships and marriage and advice for some time, and unfortunately, I'm still not yet perfect. But maybe that's just a story that I'm telling myself. Maybe I'm already ahead of the game, and I just don't realize it yet. But the environment is one of the most important parts of changing the status of our relationship, because this is what causes the relationship to change in the first place. If we see our romantic interest as a villain, a monster, that's exactly how they're going to show up. That's exactly who they are. Have you ever heard of this thing called FAE bias, the fundamental attribution error? This is one of the worst, you could say, #1 victim mindset of all time. The fundamental attribution error. What this basically means is that we attribute fault to character instead of the environment. So just like the basic example is when you're driving down the road and someone cuts you off, the person who cut you off is an absolute dickhead who needs to lose his job and you want to bash his face in. But when you're the one cutting other people off, you have a perfectly good excuse or reason to justify why you would do that. And so recognizing FAE bias in this way causes us to want to be more empathetic to our romantic interest. Empathy. Now, we're not going to discuss how far this should go, but you do need this. You don't want too little, you don't want too much. You just want the right amount, the right enough, the perfect amount, a balanced sort of level of empathy. Because if you have too little, you don't see the other side of the story. You see your romantic interest as a nuisance, a pain in the ass, a monster, a villain. And sometimes, ironically, when you see them this way at first, they might actually want to try and prove themselves other than that. But when you're so consistent in seeing them that way, then eventually they'll give up and quit, and they'll look at you exactly how you saw them. If you have too much empathy, you become sort of like a doormat. You become someone who isn't taken very seriously. You don't really hold your word. You let things go too easily, kind of thing. So it has to be kind of balanced. We need to change the way we see ourselves too. So be sure to give yourself a little bit of empathy. I'm not sure if I transitioned too fast there, but yes, we need to change ourselves, specifically our state of consciousness. And one of the greatest ways we can do that is to change the way we see ourselves. Do we see ourselves? God, I've been watching Invincible, the Amazon Prime TV series. The romance in that show is so awful, just so bad. Mark Grayson, the main character, he shows you exactly what not to do when navigating relationship problems. It's so awkward. And if you look at someone like Mark Grayson in that way, you get really awkward. You seek permission from the other person. You don't think you're good enough a lot of the time. All kinds of things. It shows up. And I know this to be true because I've seen it in other people and I've seen it in myself. How we see ourselves really has a detrimental impact on how we treat others and how we show up. Do you see yourself as the person who's just crashing out at a mate's house? Or do you see yourself as the person who is the garden, where everything you touch turns to gold no matter where you are? The home isn't where you've been kicked out of or where you're staying. At home is you. You are the home. Changing the environment. Changing the environment is what you're already doing as a result, as a side effect of these things. This is a bit more of an effect. We have something called a locus of control. It can look anything like this, but you've got this one ring inside here, this one circle, that's yours, that's all yours. Everything out here, the moon rising, the sun shining, that's out of your control. We don't need to touch that sort of thing. Busy traffic, not necessarily in your control, but you can choose when you enter the traffic, you can choose how you respond to heavy traffic. You can choose to engage in road rage or not. So there's things within your control, in your domain, that you have control over. You are the god of that. There are things outside of your control. The environment, you actually do have a lot of control in the environment. And when you can manipulate the environment to your advantage, you can eventually actually influence the way you see yourself, and it can influence the way you see the other person. And ultimately, what you're really aiming for is to have the status of the relationship change to the desirable status, which I imagine was what you want. Whether you want your ex back, you want to find someone new, or whatever. There's this famous image called the rabbit and the duck. I'm not going to draw it here, it's too big. It's this hideous looking image of what appears to be either a rabbit or a duck, but it's the exact same image. And what happens when you change the environment, the other person, over time, eventually, sometimes this can be like that, they can see a different image. They can see you differently. And that's what we need to do. Over time, we keep adding little weights to the scales to change the environment. We keep adding little weights to ourselves and our identity, and we keep adding little weights to how we see another person. And over time, these things compound. This is almost like the law of compound interest, because the more you do it over time, it just sort of disproportionately explodes, like a volcano effect, but preferably in the manner that we would like it. Because if you don't do it in the manner you would like, you're already doing this by default. With everything you're doing, you're already doing this by default. And those are the three things we must change if you wish to change the status of your relationship. Change the way you see your romantic interest. Change the way we see ourselves. Change the way we interact with the environment and change the environment itself. Now, actually, there's a reason why I say these are the three things we must do, because it's the fundamentals. It's the things that, it doesn't matter if you're avoidant or anxious attachment style. It doesn't matter if you're looking at narcissistic abuse content. It doesn't matter if it's manifestation. God, all those realms are so contaminated. It doesn't matter what else it is, dating for the first time. These are the things that we must do. But the reason we also do this is because we're trying to change our state of consciousness. That's actually the number one thing that we need to do. The number one thing that we need to do is change our state of consciousness. So even these three things are meant to help us get there. I wrote down a little scripture here, Matthew 19:16-26. And it's basically the story of the rich man who approaches Jesus asking him how to enter into the kingdom of God. He's a rich man. There are parts about the story I was trying to dissect and figure out more, but I haven't come to a conclusion yet, except I know one thing. Jesus was basically telling this man, if you want to change from, from A to B, you have to give up A in order to get to B. This isn't always the case, because a lot of God's closest friends, and even certain people in the Bible who are good people, they didn't necessarily have to give up A to get to B. It's kind of contextual, kind of depends on the circumstances. But for this rich man situation, if he really wanted to transcend to much higher godly levels of godliness, then he could have let go of his material possessions and his riches and so on. There are logical reasons as to why Jesus would suggest this. First reason would be being that he can let go of the physical world. He can detach from it more. Because he's a rich man, he's a smart man. He is the riches. He can always start from scratch, and that's not even the point. Starting from scratch isn't the big deal. He's got the golden touch. Doesn't he not have the faith that he can turn whatever he touches to gold? And another thing is, that's just how change works. You cannot sit on two chairs at the same time. It's not necessarily about gold and riches per se. But there is a scripture that says your treasure is where your heart is. So if you hold a lot of beliefs, A is like a lot of beliefs. That's what it is, beliefs. Belief systems about yourself, which is why I was trying to tell you, change the way you see your romantic interest, change the way you see yourself, change the way you see and interact with the environment to modify the environment. Because your beliefs, which are a fundamental part of the whole identity and the core and where your heart is, you attach yourself to your beliefs. You identify with them. You immerse yourself in them. But in order to change into a different person, to be the type of person who attracts your romantic interest towards you, you have to surrender those beliefs. You have to surrender and let go that they're a narcissist, that they're an avoidant, that they're broken, that they're shy, that they're autistic or something weird like that. Maybe they did have sexual relations with other people, and maybe it wasn't inside your control. But the problem is, you weren't in a position that really enabled the other party to draw themselves towards you, in a sense. You might think on the surface level, but I am. But are you really? Because if you really were, then, and I hate to say this, but they're more likely going to be drawn to you by default. If something happens more than 3 times, there's definitely a pattern going on. If you keep getting... Now, rejection is just part of the game a lot of the time. So it can just really be used as feedback. And every time you get feedback, you just keep on incrementally getting better. Just like the comedian who tells 10 jokes and only lands 1 out of the 10, he can always go back to and look at what worked and what didn't. And he refines, and he adjusts, and he pivots, and he improves, and he upgrades. And that's what we want to be doing with ourselves. It's just kind of part of the game. and it gives you veteran experience, which is what you really want. And part of this whole veteran experience of becoming the person that you want to be, where you are magnetic, you're magnetic, is you become that veteran in surrendering the beliefs, in letting go of the old beliefs, changing the way, letting go of the old version of you, the old stories, the old narratives. And I myself, I'm still struggling to identify what mine are, but I just know that this is the objective. We must find ways to do this. We must somehow be able to look at ourselves in the mirror. The only way I know how to do this so far is I do have a private texting prompt that I personally use, but it's not necessarily sufficient in itself. One other way is we need to look at ourselves from a third person perspective. Somehow, like, it's very challenging when you're looking at yourself from a first person perspective, and it's just really challenging to see yourself in a different light. You kind of rely on the stories that other people tell about you, but it's up to you to decide if those stories are true or not. So it's important that the feedback that you get, it has to be objective and discerned where the subjective may be. And you shift. You move into the direction that you desire. There's a saying that I came up with this morning. Change the seeds. Change the seeds, not the tree. If you're in a situation where you're broken up, or you're single and alone, and all these kinds of things, I don't know what it is that you're up to, but the reason we're in this position at this time is because that's the harvest that the Bible was talking about. Those are the seeds that you planted long ago, and they've come into fruition, and this is exactly what you're asking for, because those were the seeds that you've been planting for so long. So if we want to change the trees, we need to change the seeds. Now, I don't mean like genetically modify the whole thing, although that's probably what you're going to do at an identity-based level. The seeds do include your thoughts, your emotions, and your actions, and anything else, particularly the narrative, the internal dialogue, the way you see yourself. You change the seed. I suppose you do genetically modify the seed. You change the tree. And this tree is the new harvest. And that is how we are going to change the status of our relationship, by changing the seeds. We change the seeds by changing the way we see our romantic interests. We change the way we see ourselves. We do that by changing the internal dialogue and the narrative that we hold about ourselves. And there's dozens, perhaps, maybe millions of these internal stories. But there's really just the root, the first principle, the first cause of these things that we need to identify, the root. What those are, I can't say for sure. For example, not feeling good enough. You have, if that's the case, in that example, you need to find out what's causing that. Because it's not true. A lot of the time, it's probably not true. So, very unlikely. Very, very unlikely. And we change the environment. Because the reason we change the environment, before I end the video, is because I said this to my brother the other day. If you wear a clown suit, right? Let's use the rich man and Jesus here for a moment. Now they're just two normal people. If this dude here was wearing a jester outfit, and he's all colored up, this person is going to have a very interesting response just by looking at him. His thoughts are going to be wildly different. He's going to have very imaginative ideas about what he's seeing and what he's looking at. And the same is true for another person. He's looking at the jester here, but unlike this guy, he's got his own set of ideas. Right? This guy thinks this is funny. This guy here thinks that this is hideous. This is insulting. And someone else, maybe like a little child, might think that's funny. Or another child might think the clown is scary. But notice, despite wearing the clown suit, he's sending out a bit of a signal. As a default, he can't help this. He can't not do this. It's just the default. It's the laws of nature. And then they bounce back to you like echo relocation. You throw a pebble in the water and it bounces all these ripples, boing, 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 like that. And then if there's something on the other side of all that, they will bounce back to let you know, hey, there's actually something bouncing back over here. That's how that works. And this, I don't know how much pieces of data that a single eyeball can take in, but even just the eyeball takes in probably trillions of tiny pieces of information every millisecond. Now imagine how powerful this must be on the subconscious level, on the level of consciousness itself. You change your identity, you change who you are, you change the seat in which you sit. It's all going to be the same. You're going to be sending out signals, but the signals themselves will be different. The costume will be different. Maybe this time you're wearing a crown. Maybe you're wearing a suit, a tuxedo. Maybe you're wearing a dress. It's still sending out signals. And that's just how it works. But then people will signal back to you. Maybe the same person who thought the jester was cool thinks that the crown or the dress is hideous. Now, this doesn't mean that we need to be a chameleon necessarily. Being a chameleon, if we're going to be a chameleon, it has to be by choice. If we're going to adapt to our environment and change things around us, we do it by choice, not by accident. And we also have to do one other thing, is that if we're literally going to be sitting in one of these chairs, it has to light our soul on fire. Because you could be sitting on any chair. I know these are circles, but imagine the chairs. Why not find this chair that lights your soul on fire? And in the process of doing that, you get much stronger, much powerful, much more desirable effects. That's what these are, effects. Another word for this is feedback loops and chain reactions. Feedback loops can have no less than 2 components within them, and there's millions of them, and they're lightning fast. There's also rhythms, by the way, and feedback loops also like to go up and down with them. And then what happens is, like I was saying, they come back to you like echo relocation. Why did I bring that up? I guess that's just how it works. And you want to light your soul on fire. I will say, when you're being as you are and you're sending out these ripple effects, it does have an effect on the other person. I think this is what I was trying to say. It has an effect on the other person, right? It does affect them, and it does affect the way they show up. It does affect the way they respond. But the thing about the environment, which is why we need to change this, I think this is what I was trying to get at, is because we internalize the environment. The things around us, the things that we buy as personal possessions, are often extensions of our own identity. We see ourselves in those things. Or we depend on these things for our own survival. But if it's not that, then it's an extension of identity. And we see ourselves in those things. And what happens is when you see something, you internalize it. It's a bit like a validation loop. And so it just gets excremented. And then you see it, and then it internalizes itself in within you again, and it just keeps on looping back. And this is the thing, actually. It keeps on expanding, it keeps on expanding, the loops keep on running, the machine keeps on working, and eventually the law of compound interest just goes kaboof, like that, and it's disproportionate, either in your favor or against you. And this is the law of the universe that's stated in Matthew somewhere, chapter 19. To the one who has, he will be given more, but the one who does not have, even what he appears to have, will be taken from him. Thanks for watching. If you found that interesting, feel free to share your thoughts and feel free to let me know if you think that you can apply this, or let me know if you think that this advice sucked. And if you want to learn more, feel free to subscribe, share your thoughts, feedback, and check out my love triangle formula. You can find at beacons.io/Yenovah Tylervite. That's my little mini website where you can learn how to attract a member of the opposite sex by default as the way that I've personally done it in the past.